listening to Resist and Restore, a podcast from the Circle of Hope pastors, where we're extending the table of our dialogue. I'm Jonny Rashid. I use he, him pronouns.
I'm Rachel Sensenig, she, her.
I'm Julie Hoke, she, her.
Before we get the show started, I want to tell you that Ben White, who has been on our podcast and a pastor in Circle of Hope for 7 years. The podcast hasn't been going for 7 years, but he's been on the podcast and a pastor in Circle of Hope. He has resigned from his position. He was ready to move on, and he's going to find employment as a chaplain, which he's really gifted at too. Mm-hmm. He brought those skills to Circle of Hope and developed them here too, so we wish him the best. And also, I have to tell you, it is sorrowful to share that with you. We will miss working with Ben on the podcast and in our jobs. So we wish him the best, but we also have heavy hearts about it. So pray for us and think about us and our church during this time too. Mm-hmm. This episode is about Advent, and we're imagining new birth and new life and where God will be born. And so we hope to bring that. We're in some mystery right now, not sure of what's next, but we are assured of God's faithfulness. So we're going to talk about what Advent means to us and how we're entering into it in the middle of the show. But we're going to start with some talkback. And this was based on the episode we did last week with our friend Jordan Burge, who is our Sunday meeting coordinator and on our leadership team and a theologian. One of my friends listened to it, and Jordan was talking about this idea of becoming human and how we experientially become human. And that's the goal of our faith and our walk with Jesus, and even how we get saved. We are born into this world and become more fully who we are. Jesus then being the first full human. So we follow our Lord to do that. And my friend said this. I really liked how he put it, because he's working on this for his own research. And he says, we become anti-racist and become more fully human when we dedicate ourselves to self-surrender through the imitation of the cross. He says that whiteness, or really the force that orders us racially, makes us less human. And as we shed that in anti-racism and move towards Jesus and imitating Jesus, we become more fully who we are. What do you two think about that idea? How do you engage with it? How do you engage with the forces in the world that deform us or make us less human or make us less alive?
First of all, I think I would say that it's as a white person, I think sometimes it's hard to see even what that looks like because of the way that what has been so normalized for me. So this idea that I become more fully human, the one I am created to be, precisely by dying to this false self that's been so propped up and given to me. It's so the gospel, and yet it's easy to lose sight of without conscious spiritual attention. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, Jesus says you have to take up your cross and follow me. Whoever loses their life will find it. And I think that this is at the heart of that the world and the worldly ways and the powers that be give us a self that can take the place of our Savior.
Yes.
And it takes that self-sacrifice and dying to that self over and over again is painful, vulnerable work.
What are some ways that you've died to yourself, Rachel? How do you even do that?
Well, I was thinking particularly of how freeing it is to not have to know the answer. I mean, for me, that's a part of whiteness kind of baked into my experience, where I I'm sure it's connected to my personality too. Not sure how all that works together, but just that I have to know the thing to do and be able to do it. And that's often an area where Jesus shows me, no, that's not true. You can actually let that go. That's part of what society has. That's part of that unearned privilege that actually oppresses you, and you don't have to know. You can ask other people. You can join with others and ask questions and like enter into this like real humility that is like your true self in God. So I'm trying to hear that invitation more clearly and move with it.
I'm struck by Jesus in Mark when he centers the child. He displaces the grown-ups. He puts the child in the middle of the room. He carries the child in his arms and says, you have to make space for people like this. Children are destitute. They're short. You don't always see them, They're short in stature and in status. They're ignored. I think Jesus even calls the child it. So it's not even like gendered. So like there's something about how the society then ignored children. And honestly, our society does too, right? Sometimes. But Jesus is interested in making room for people that the society sees as less human. And when we do that, we become more human. Like when we create space for who the society ignores, we become more like Jesus. And when we self-empty, kenosis, and then get filled up, we become more like God, theosis. That's something else this person was saying. We can move that way. And for those of us that have less, because of our wealth or because of our status, our gender, our sexuality, our race, we can be filled more abundantly because we already don't have it, And then others are invited into shedding too, into letting go, into being filled up, That's what Mary means when she sings, send the rich away empty. That's not a negative thing, so they can be filled up by God, and fill the poor with good things. That's what Jesus is doing. That is becoming human. That is the incarnation. That's the story of Advent. This baby comes and gets filled up and fills up the whole world.
Yeah, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, being born in the likeness of humankind.
Is that Philippians 2, Julie?
That is, thank you. Philippians 2.
I love that. I love the idea of self-emptying, And I think Jesus did that, So let's keep following in the way and move with Jesus to become more fully human. Thanks, Jordan, for the interview last week, and thanks for this contributor for sharing with us. If you want to talk back to us, go to Resist and Restore podcast at circleofhope.net, and you can do that. We'd love to hear from you. And if you email us, you will certainly be on the show. I'm so glad you're listening to this podcast and part of our community. We want to keep extending the table of our dialogue, and you're a part of that. So write back to us again. We want to hear from you, and you're helping to make this show happen. So, a few ways that you can make it happen is by subscribing wherever you listen to this podcast, giving us a high rating, writing a review, letting us know what you think of it, and sharing it with a friend. Do any of those 4 things, and it'll help somebody get to know us and hear us. We're looking for people who are looking for us. So if you think someone would like this, share it with them. You don't have to convince someone to like it. Just find someone that you think might, and that might help them out, right? And then go to our website too, circleofhope.church, and you can share money with us there. I think that's good for us, good for our soul to be generous with our money. But you can also get connected to a cell or a Sunday meeting, which is our main thing. We want you part of those. And also, You can check out our daily prayers, blogs we write, videos we make, lots of opportunities for you, even if you're not in the Philadelphia region. Thanks again for listening. Rachel, is it true? What's Madvent? Like, you have a thing as a Sunday meeting, you're at South Broad, and she called it Madvent because, like, mad, angry Advent, right? That's the idea, so it's Madvent. Can you just tell me about what that means?
Well, yes, it has morphed a little bit. It started out kind of as a joke during a Sunday meeting talkback where we were talking about a story in one of the Gospels where Jesus was angry, and somebody felt like we didn't explore that enough. And so we were talking about all the things that there are to be angry about, and how many of us feel them right now, like, you know, still in the pandemic, dealing with all the stuff inside of us and in the world that is difficult. And so we wanted to make space for that. We didn't want to put pressure on ourselves to have to just hurry up and have a holly jolly Christmas and be of good cheer, because Advent really is this invitation to pause in whatever we're in and wait for the fullness of our hope. And so we wanted to kind of, the Madvent is about like accepting whatever we're dealing with right now and kind of bringing that to Jesus in this process, this nice long process of looking toward the future with God.
What do we miss if we just go to Holly Jolly Christmas, eggnog, candy canes? I just bought some. I bought a pound of candy canes. So what am I missing? Just tell me. Like, what do we miss if we just jump right to it and we don't get to wait and anticipate?
Julie probably has a good answer to that.
Well, we might bypass some of our humanness and the humanness of Christ being born in all of the vulnerability of this little infant child. I think that it takes all the weeks of Advent to even, I think, settle into the significance of God with us being born as a baby, and my own finding my own story in this story again. So jumping to the joy and the celebration, I think, is like the quick fix of all that sugar, Jonny, that you might be consuming in a pound of candy canes.
I'm not going to eat the whole pound.
Okay, good.
I'm making brownie peppermint cookies with little, like...
Oh, I knew you were making something good.
I'm not giving them to you guys after this conversation. You want to go more and have sorrow. No cookies for you. I'm just kidding.
But I think we can enter the joy differently when we don't try to bypass ourselves in the process and the realities of this world. I love that this week we light the candle for the prophets, because they remind us that to get to the mystery and wonder of God with us takes cultivating a connection with God right now in the midst of all of the difficulty. And the prophets knew about that. They were time and time again in the midst of the mess and the difficulty and oppression and suffering.
Yes.
Jump in. I don't know where I'm going here, Rachel.
You're inspiring me to remember our daily prayer that I read this morning about Advent, and the prophets especially giving us this opportunity to hold impossible tension. And I just want to read a little paragraph to us here. Advent gives us the opportunity to hold impossible tension. The Almighty Creator was born, as all humans are born, with soft bones capable of passing through a pelvis, vulnerable, unaware, reliant on his mother. Jesus was born into a world dark with dangers and a life threatened from the very start. Salvation's light came into the darkness and immediately fled. The affliction, wandering, bitterness, and gall belong right next to the Lord's great love. Throughout the history of his people, and certainly in the circumstances of his own birth, Jesus shows us that impossible tension cannot be dispersed with any power of positive thinking or other technique, nor ought it to be erased at all. It is the pattern of creation, the pattern of God's faithfulness, and the pattern of our living, dying, and rising Savior. So this holding of impossible tensions with God's great love is like is life, and Advent gives us this really clear invitation to do it. That encouraged me.
One of the most special things about Advent for me is getting to wait for Jesus to come again, because I'm in my own Advent now as I'm waiting for Jesus to return. Like, I'm in my own captivity. I'm in my own dark period. And we all are on earth, this side of heaven. Jesus has not come back, so we are still awaiting the Messiah to return. And so, just like the prophets and John the Baptist and Mary and the shepherds were waiting for Jesus. And I really want to live into that vacancy and feel it, you know. It's like the conversation earlier about self-emptying, you know. I don't have a manger out yet, but you know, you don't put Jesus in, right? Yet?
No.
Do you like put Jesus in later?
Yep, Christmas Day.
That's the idea, right? That's we're all waiting in anticipation to be full and to be filled and to be for things to change. And the hope of waiting for what we are assured allows me to actively wait now. So what does active waiting look like? I'm creating a space for Jesus to come, and I'm trying, like John the Baptist is. I'm making a way. We're calling people to follow Jesus. The Lord is near. The Lord is coming. Get things right. Get things in order. You know. So it is kind of like getting your house ready for Christmas. It is in some ways like anticipating it. How do you two actively wait, as opposed to idly wait? Because you're not just standing around, you're doing things. So how do you do that? How do you prepare the way?
Well, for me and my family, last night, actually, it meant making space for grief. We had put the tree up, but hadn't decorated it yet. And so last night we started decorating, and my daughter pulled out in her box of decorations. She had written a note to herself last year and tucked it in there and pulled it out. And it was like a little joke. I was just on a Post-it note. It was a little joke about if we're in quarantine this time next year, because it seemed so impossible that might be the case. And she read it to me, and I was like, oh, thank God we're not. And my kids were both like, what? We are. And I was like, we're not in quarantine. Like, the pandemic's still going, but they just started essentially sharing their grief of it's not over yet. We're still in it. And I think that's that them. I realized in that moment, okay, this is what we're doing. We're making space for grief. I wanted to have this beautiful family time. We're decorating the tree, you know, and I realized, no, what's actually needed is some space to grieve and to name what was and what is that is not yet fulfilled, that is not yet complete. It is the waiting for the fullness of joy, and we just feel it so tangibly. It's visceral in this experience of the pandemic in a unique way.
Oh, yes. My family has some traditions that help us wait as well. And one is the Advent wreath at the dinner table, where we light a candle before each meal. We used to sing a cute little song that a couple years ago my kids said they were not gonna sing anymore. But we still light the candle each night and kind of check in with each other in our waiting, and we think about the character in the story. This week it is the prophets, and just that tradition calls us back each day to the waiting.
What do you do, Jonny?
Honestly, I mean, you know me. I love Christmas time. I try to get as festive as I can. So, I'm still...
You're listening to Mariah Carey on Thanksgiving.
I listen to Mariah Carey. I'm making eggnog. I'm making Christmas cookies every weekend. The tree is up. It's the whole thing. You know, I pump it up. I like the holidays. I like feeling happy. And also, I think I said this last year on our show, I like going to Lowe's and looking at the Christmas stuff. I want to be... I live in a little row home, but, if I were to ever move to the suburbs, I want, the things they blow up and
all
put on their
lawn
lawn.
Things.
You know what I mean? Or, did you ever go on Miracle on 13th Street? In South Philly, where, the one block is, full of lights and stuff? That's so
beautiful.
cool. And so, I like entering in with the culture, hey, you're all hopefully waiting, too. You have an idea of what is coming, so you can be excited about it. So I think that, post the first incarnation of Jesus, the celebration before makes some sense. But I also am permitted to... I mean, maybe this doesn't totally compute, but, getting to feel all the joy helps me to feel pain, too. So, it increases my capacity for it. So, I've also been free to enter into when things don't feel good, when things are going wrong, and when there's suffering happening. The prospect of celebrating the return of Christ or the birth of Christ gives me hope, too, you know? But I'm also kind of nuts because I sing Silent Night to my children every day for the whole year. So, Christ the Savior is born every night. And living into that is good. So it's hard for me to... I admit I have to enter into the pain more actively because I'm so eager for the joy to come. So that's how I do it. Do you have any questions about that?
I sometimes also try to take on a discipline that helps me not jump. It's probably too much like Lent, but that helps me not jump to compulsively needing to do, avoid the suffering. So this year I am committing to, I've kind of fallen off of my spiritual and physical discipline of walking, but this year I'm committed to getting out there and taking a walk, which is my prayer time with Jesus, and I'm going to do that no matter how cold it is, because it helps me to check in and actually be with God in the suffering instead of I don't know, making cookies or shopping online or whatever else is more fun.
Being in the cold is suffering for you, isn't it, Rachel?
It really is.
I've been taking these morning walks still, and the sun doesn't rise at the end of them anymore. I used to leave my house at 6, and then I'd get back at around 6:30, and then when I did, the sun would be up. I could take a picture down Cecil B. Moore on my way back, and I could see the sun rising over Temple University. But now it's still dark when I get home. Mm-hmm. And Advent is kind of like that. It's still dark. The sun hasn't risen yet. The sun isn't here. And so that I want to empathize too, as much as I can, with people who feel like the Son hasn't arrived. So I listen to Jeremiah, who's lamenting the destruction of Jerusalem and Judah as Babylon takes over them, wondering what hope do I have, right? And John the Baptist, same kind of story, decreasing so that Jesus can increase. Mary, afraid. You know that Henry Ossawa Tanner, Mary the Annunciation painting, right? I think you have it hanging. You're probably looking at it right now, Rachel, right?
I am.
Like that vivid image of her being in fear, wondering, like, you know, what the hell am I signing up for? Like, what is this? You know? Or the shepherds being frightened by the angels in the sky, right? All these things were like, wow, the future, the coming of Jesus in many ways can be scary. And so not only are we entering into our pain and our suffering, but like, there's also fear at like the judgment and the justice that Jesus brings. Like John the Baptist, the message he's giving is not that like nice. He's not like everything is going to feel good now. He's definitely not passing out candy canes. He's saying, get right with God.
Yeah.
You know, like God coming is good news for the lowly, for the oppressed. But if you're in a different position, something's going to change. Like you can see the anxiety in Herod when he learns that Jesus is coming. You know, there's actual consequence to this. So like helping people even feel afraid, like feel their fear, and let go of the things they're afraid to lose, so that they can get close to Jesus and relate to Jesus, this baby. You know, that's what's so special about it too, right? Like it's a baby that's coming, you know, and people are actually afraid. Like to be afraid of a baby shows the consequence of the moment.
Right. It's a massive disruption. And Herod's response is to double down with violence, to eliminate the threat of the disruption.
And I think that we're tempted to double down in violence. And I think that something I heard recently that I want to share with you is that if we're pro-peace and pro-Jesus, we should be pro-conflict, and we should expect that disruption to cause conflict. But one way to avoid conflict is to bypass it with violence, to try to use overwhelming force to simply end a conflict, as opposed to actually engaging in it and feeling that discomfort. And so the powerful are tempted to use violence to shut things down. And I think that, or to force their way. And I think that engaging in the discomfort of the conflict is helpful. I don't think Herod wanted to do that particularly, but I think that we see people living in that tension that you were talking about, that push and pull during Advent too.
And I think that coercion, that temptation to force, is ever present on all sides of this conversation, because everybody can kind of do that in their own way, and I think. Yeah, it's really compelling to see Jesus like always like asking questions instead of you should do this or you should do that. Never forcing, but asking. His way is truly different than what we are than what we are tempted to do when we're afraid.
Totally. So how do you think our listeners can prepare to enter into Advent? If this is your first time even hearing of Advent or engaging with it, pastors, what do you think? What can we offer them? What are some simple things they can do? You all have Advent wreaths at home?
I don't even have a wreath, but I have candles.
Candles are good. What do you do with the candles, Julie?
It's a rhythm. It's a tangible rhythm that helps me mark the time and enter into some space, some reflection, the story. We light a candle each week for this week for the prophets, Next week, it'll be for John the Baptist, and then the shepherds, and then Mary, and then the birth of Christ. And just returning to that little ritual helps to ground me and remind me. It marks this time, this season, as a journey with some intention. To return to this rhythm is to return to the story again and again. And with all the other things happening, it's easy to get caught up in, the to-do list and the busyness. And so just lighting a candle each day draws me back into this period of waiting and anticipation for the arrival of God with us.
Mm-hmm. Do you all use the daily prayer to help with Advent?
Mm-hmm.
How do you use that, Rachel?
It's usually the first thing I check on my phone in the morning. I have is it an app? I think it is.
No, it's not an app. You have a browser that probably has it linked.
How do I get the little picture is on the front of my phone for Water Daily Prayer?
Because I think what you did is you made a link and then you made a bookmark and then made that bookmark into a icon on your phone.
Wonderful. Somebody who loves me did that for me. And I go to it every morning, probably when I'm still in bed, and I read through that and I kind of rest. I'm still like in a restful position as I'm kind of sitting with God, whatever it's directing me to do.
And for our listeners, you can subscribe and get it in your inbox every day.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I would recommend for Advent is singing song, and we do that every week in our Sunday meetings in some form, even online. There are folks on the at-home Sunday meeting that are providing music for us to sing along to, and I think that act of engaging our bodies in worship helps us to metabolize pain and suffering and be with Jesus in the waiting and express joy and get to joy even when we don't feel it initially. So I highly recommend singing Christmas music, even on the radio.
Love it on the radio. I fill myself up as much as I can. So I think permission to grieve and to suffer is important. But here's one thing I want to encourage you to do. When you are at the department store or you're walking through town and it begins to look a lot like Christmas, I think you receive the joy. Mm-hmm. Like these people are looking for something, and you have the answer to it. I know some Christians, even more progressive Christians, that are quick to say, I'm into Advent, but I don't like the holiday season. I think you have to see what they're going for. What do they want? What are they pursuing? What's the thing they're waiting for? For a lot of these people, the whole year is kind of in the darkness, and then all of a sudden you have this bright spot at the end of the year. And for this year, people are seeing people again for the first time in a long time. Right? So there's joy. They're looking for joy because we have a desire for joy. So when you see it, when you see the light show and all the candy and cookies and hot chocolate and all that stuff, see it as a yearning for something more, and find comfort that you know the author of that joy, and you can share it if someone wants to receive it. But you can also just bring yourself. Right? And your joy that you bring to the season is like you bringing Jesus to it too. You matter to this. And your presence at the Christmas party matters. When you toast the hosts or toast the baby, right? You're helping to bring Jesus to the moment. I think those things are good. So for me, enter into the joy because you can see that these people are yearning and desiring something. And don't let your cynicism tamp that down. You know, be hokey, be corny. That's okay. You know, that's how I see it, because I don't have enough trouble in my life. So like making fun of the people celebrating Christmas, I don't have room for that, really.
Yeah, look for the light where it is. Going back to the candles, I like the ritual of adding another candle each week, because you watch the light grow. And literally around the neighborhood, I love watching the lights grow. People put their lights out. There's this one neighbor a street over who literally adds more lawn ornaments every night, and until the entire, and it is the little, row homes that we're in, but that block has a front yard section, and he covers the entire front yard with lights.
That's awesome.
Yeah. By the
That is
time
awesome.
Christmas Day is here, it's impressive.
Well, thanks, y'all. I hope that we can help you all enter into Advent. Like Rachel and Julie were saying, use our daily prayer, come to our Sunday meetings, enter into a cell during this time, and wait for the Savior to be born. And if you're in town, I think we'll probably have Zoom options, but if you're in town, Christmas Eve, we'll have something earlier in the day at 2212 South Broad for families, with families in mind. Is that right, Rachel? I think our children's teams are leading that. And then at night at 2007 Frankfurt Ave at 10:45, we'll worship together. And this is really the highlight of the year for me. We'll worship together and welcome in this baby Savior. It's a candlelit vigil, silent night at the end. Real great ritual to enter into. So that's a good thing to do, and it's late enough that you can come after your Feast of 7 Fishes. That's something you guys people do, Rachel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Eat 7 kinds of fish, because it's Italian, right? You're Italian, right?
That's right.
Well, there you go. You can come after you have all that fish in you.
I bet you make something even more delicious, Jonny.
I'll have to find 7 fishes. Yeah, thanks again for listening. Well, go ahead. What do you want to say about this?
No, wrap us up.
No, I want to know. I must.
I was just going to say, what is the significance? I don't know anything about the Feast of 7 Fishes.
Do you know, Rachel?
I don't actually know where it came from, but I will look it up. And
well, why doesn't one of our listeners look it up, talk back to us, tell us what it is, okay? Write us back. Resist and Restore Podcast at circleofhope.net.
In this last section, we want to share what's been nourishing our souls. It's spiritual show and tell, and hopefully it's a little something that can nourish you in this Advent season. So, Jonny and Rachel, what's been nourishing your soul?
I'm reading a book called The Awakened Heart by Gerald May. I really like that guy. And I turned to it last night, even in the middle of the night when I woke up worried. I turned to it, and it comforted me in a way, just like we're talking about Advent, about like Jesus meeting us in our arrival, in whatever we're bringing. Gerald May was talking about using the words consecration and dedication to kind of bring ourselves to God. And I'm trying to decide whether to read this part to you. We probably don't have time for it, but...
Go for it.
Okay. Thanks, Jonny. In dedication, you designate something as a reminder of God, of your desire for love, or of love's presence around you. In consecration, you consciously offer yourself in hope to the Holy One in the midst of your activities. Both are occasions for little interior glances. There is an old tradition of dedicating one's suffering, whatever it may be, for the sake of others' welfare. Many saints have dedicated their pain and physical illness as a powerful form of intercessory prayer. At the very least, pain can be a reminder of our desire for love and our need for grace. Pain is a fact of life, and although we'd rather be without it and should do everything possible to minimize it, we can choose how we wish to be with it. any kind of pain, can nurture the interior glance. I have known people who were able to let their mental worries or emotional upsets remind them of God in powerful ways. God often reaches us through our distress, but we can join the process with dedication and consecration. It's not always easy, and when the distress is severe, it may seem impossible. But I will never forget one beautiful man who suffered from a deep, crippling depression that had lasted for years and was unresponsive to treatment. In what I consider to be an absolute miracle, he was given the grace to consecrate his suffering entirely. His immobility, his self-disparagement and unreasoning guilt, even his suicidal thoughts. He went far beyond reminders and little glances. His depression was his worship. I have no idea how it was possible, and I have never again seen such a thing. But it did happen, and it could happen again.
So good. You guys ever get snail mail? I got some this week.
Once in a while.
I got this letter from my friend's mom who was praying for me, and she has stationery and stuff and real nice penmanship, so that was cool. And then I'm reading it, and I just start crying when I'm reading it. Like, it touched me so much that someone would take the time to do that. And even the words and the love and the prayers and the connection brought me to tears. And then she had Bible verses she wanted to share. And she wrote the Bible verses in the stationery. Like, my penmanship is terrible, and I've been typing for my whole life. So, like, to receive this gift is real special. And then also, I had some friends that went on a spiritual retreat in Texas, of all places. I'm holding up the Texas flag postcard that I have. And these are friends that I met on the internet who sent me a postcard because we're real friends, you know?
Wow.
We even do a Secret Santa together. So, like, there's, like, real... I was touched by, like, the thought, the connection, and the love that this little online community that has actually been an important part of my life for the last 5 or 6 years actually gave me something tangible. And another member of that community, I don't know how I got all these postcards in 1 week, so, like, that's interesting, but, like...
Is it Christmas? Like, are they Christmas
No, look
cards?
at this. There's nothing Christmas about this.
They're just right into
St.
you.
Simon's Island in Georgia. And this was just so sweet. Like... And these people are like Anglicans, Presbyterians. Some of them like have very various views than me. So it's not even all like the same kind of style. But they're that really encouraged me. I was really grateful for that. So that definitely nourished my soul. So thank you to the people that sent me stuff. Really nice.
Through the mail.
Through the mail.
Well, I had a distant friend nourish my soul this week, not through snail mail, but we were just texting back and forth, and she told me she was praying for me, and she said, "I'm actually whistling my prayer for you. Why don't you try it?" And it made me laugh out loud first because it's just a little absurd and something I've never done. And her point was that, breathing and using my body can be a prayer, especially when I don't have words, when what's going on is deeper than words. And it actually lifted my spirits to try to whistle. I'm a terrible whistler. I can only whistle by like sucking in air. Do you know anybody like that?
I'm like that too, Julie.
Okay.
Wait, how do people whistle?
I can only make one little sound on one note by sucking in the air.
Wait, you whistle by blowing out?
No, by sucking in. Most people, I think, whistle by blowing out.
I suck in too. We all suck in.
It's terrible.
I never knew this about either one of you.
If the three of us suck in, I think most people suck in. I don't think a lot of people blow out.
Well, I think the idea about whistling is blowing out, right?
I don't know. Why are we all doing it wrong? We're smart people. We're capable people. How could it be possible that all three of us can only do it in one way and we think we're wrong? No, I think we're right.
Maybe I've been wrong about whistling my whole life. Maybe I don't know.
The idea of whistling is blowing out?
I think so.
Like it's a flute?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, anyway, I would consider myself not a very good whistler, but just the act of doing it brought me a little joy and reminded me, kind of like what you were saying earlier about singing. I think you said it helps us metabolize our grief, our emotion. Our bodies do that. So it was nourishing to my soul to be prayed for by a friend and reminded that my breath and my body can help me pray and process in ways that my mind and my words can't always do. So I hope you all can find ways to experience that too this week.
Yes. Thank you, pastors. Julie, your sharing just reminded me of the words of carol that we sang on Sunday, the love song that they bring, that the angels were singing this love song to the world. And so may we hear that, a little glimpse of it, or a little note, maybe even a single note of it, whistling in, sucking in what we whistle of this love song that Jesus is bringing again to us this season. May you be nourished this Advent. God bless you.